What's the worst coworker you've ever worked with? Hired a cook on a good recommendation. He was just fine the first 2 weeks. Then I noticed food going missing. Then supplies started going missing. Then a customer told me that he had been adding auto 30% tips his food purchases. When I looked at the books, I saw that he had been adding 30% tips to all the credit card sales. And the cash rings were off from what should have been sold. I fired him that day. The next day he came in and apologized. Said he was on drugs and was going to rehab. I wished him well. Then next day he tried to break in after close and was caught. Idiot. I worked with a guy who'd interrupt any conversation to talk about anything as if he was the expert. And I don't use anything as a hyperbole. He truly had something to say about anything, including things he had never heard of or obviously didn't know much about. When the subject being discussed was something in the category of things he didn't know much about, he would slowly steer the conversation away from the original discussion to something he would like to talk about at the moment. It was both amazing and the most annoying thing I had ever had to deal with. He was like that Wikipedia game where you start with Star Wars and somehow end up on LGBTQ+ struggles. Not to mention that conversation was basically 98% of him just talking non-stop. Everybody else was way too polite and against conflict to say anything, including me, so most people just tried to stay away from him. But he'd follow people around. I eventually left, but I even remember having a nightmare where he was the best man at my wedding. This guy named Daniel I used to work with at McDonald's in high school. He let everyone know he worked out and enjoyed being on the football team. He had this thing about taking 5 shits a day. He would walk by on his way back from the toilet, chest out, shoulders back, and triumphantly announce, "That's shit number 3. Fucking Daniel. This is about 15 years ago, but the office I worked in instituted a scent-free policy. One woman, who was already insufferable, was so offended by it that she snuck in her perfume collection. She'd walk down the halls and spray perfume into empty offices or cubicles when no one was looking, or before everyone arrived in the morning. This went on for well over a month or 2 and we had no idea who was responsible. My coworkers and I started referring to this mysterious person as the Chanel Bandit. She was finally caught on camera in the act. She'd left for 3 weeks vacation and was unaware that we had installed cameras after a break-in. Some of us already suspected her, as the Chanel Bandit mysteriously stopped spraying while she was away. She quit right after she was caught. None of us were sad to see that cedar-scented psycho leave. I had a manager once who dumped trash on my desk my 3rd day there. She said it was to remind me that taking out the trash was part of my job description. It wasn't. I was a research assistant at a mortgage firm. My worst coworker was one I worked with when I was a cashier at Walmart. She approached me and asked me to cash out her paycheck. I was still new at the job and never got training on how to do that function. She was sympathetic, so she walked me through how to do it. Transaction over and done. I go on about my day. I get called back a couple of days later by my managers and they circled me in an office and accused me of stealing. After tears, videotapes, and telling them what happened, they told me that apparently this coworker of mine had stolen not only from me, but several other people that day as well. They just wanted to confirm I wasn't in on the deal. Fuck Walmart, and fuck that bitch for almost getting me arrested. He creeped the fuck out of all the girls at work and then it came out he had stalking and sexual assault charges pending outside work. Fired that day. No contest. It was the literal crackhead I worked with for 4 months that was also secretly living in the office and being completely nonsensical when he was actually working. We found a mattress folded up in the warehouse after he was let go and an actual brand new crack pipe, with a price tag on it, to boot, squirreled away back there. He and his family, not just him living in the office, left discarded food everywhere like pizza crusts in the toilet brush holder in the bathroom. What even? And they left hair in the sink in the bathroom as they were obviously bathing in there. 2. As we had no actual bathing facilities in the office, one day during his tenure, he sent an email saying his alarm didn't go off and he'd be in at X time, which kept getting moved back later and later. He eventually showed up at 4:40 p.m. and we closed at 5 p.m. Lol. See comment above about secretly living in the office. There's so much more I could go into. It was a wild 4 months. That's for sure. My coworker likes to initiate conversations, then does long pauses where you go to say something back. Then he cuts you off and keeps talking. He has entire conversations almost entirely by himself. He also likes to make changes to my paperwork before it's turned in. Ends up riddled with spelling mistakes while he tries to make the content look smarter. Fortunately, it's all electronically stamped with who made revisions. When I was an intern, there was this old shrew who would call people into her office. My cube shared a thin wall. Gossip. Then call those people in to tell them what was said, etc. She would try to frame people for shit she did wrong. She was so arrogant, and she refused to adapt to workforce modernization. Example, she refused to learn how to hyperlink in emails, documents, etc. A real ray of sunshine she was. I worked at a grocery store and one of the scheduling ladies was a total C-bomb. When you work at a grocery store you expect to have shifts all over the place. That's part of the job, so I'm not complaining about that. Just about 2 years into working there I had an accident and broke my thumb, hand. Not while at work unfortunately lol. And needed surgery. I went to apply for employment insurance. And they required a record of employment. So I asked the woman in charge of that, the aforementioned scheduling lady, if she would mind sending that off so I could still pay rent while I was off work recovering. By the way, she told me she already had. So I go back to the A offices and they told me they still had no row, so I go back to my old work and ask her a second time. This happens until I asked her to do it 4 times. This resulted in me having to borrow money from my parents for Christmas in order to pay my rent. Back when I worked at a restaurant I was friends with the bartender. Chill dude. Right up until they made him manager, and that small amount of power and increase in pressure made him so angry all the time. He screamed at me that I was shit at my job because I didn't do a thing that I've never been asked to do before. He made me miss my last bus so I couldn't get home. It was pitch black outside and I cried on the bench outside the restaurant. Worst working day and worst coworker. It took me a long time to get over that and realize I wasn't a shit worker. He was just stressed and didn't know how to handle it, I suppose. He was a complete utter moron. He was incompetent in every way. But the icing on the cake was when he tried to put one of the pickup trucks into gear with a wiper stick and called me an idiot when I told him it was the wrong lever. Edit 1. Oh my god. I didn't expect this to garner so much attention. Edit 2. I see a lot of comments thinking it was a 3 on the tree manual. This truck was 98 Ram 1500. Automatic trans. Column shifter. My old supervisor. She was that special brand of too nice. Laughing was her nervous tick, and hoo boy it was constant. She was incapable of being assertive, which is not the best quality for someone whose job is telling other people what to do. The best she could do was be passive-aggressively nice when she really needed something done, which just made everyone dislike her. Worked with a girl who would sometimes just lay in the floor and play on her phone. She would routinely flip out about something her boyfriend did and just start screaming curse words, sometimes in front of customers. She was eventually fired for smoking weed while on the clock. One of my favorite things about being in the military was that your pre-military status did not matter. Everyone wears the same uniform and you'd never know if your favorite military leader came from privilege or squalor. The uniform, for all of its drawbacks, is an objectively effective unifier. It levels the playing field. looking the same as everyone else challenged me to ensure that my work ethic and ideas created opportunities, not some predetermined status. I had a peer who was better than all of that. He didn't do the work unless it interested him. We didn't do interesting things, and constantly complained that our work was below him. On more than one occasion, he tried to pay for others to do his work for him. His entire point of being in the military was to prove to his father that he could earn something, and sought to accomplish that by claiming he'd already earned it. Fuck that guy. Well, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.